So let's get one thing out of the way. There are two creation stories in Genesis. Most of you probably know that. They cannot be reconciled into one story, and they are not intended to be reconciled into one story. And it's okay. It's okay that there are two very different stories at the beginning of Genesis, because we know they are not written as historical accounts, that they're mythology. And if you like mythology, you can rejoice, because two are better than one. I do wish we had time to talk about all of the fascinating aspects of this chapter. It's one of my favorites, but for the sake of time, we're going to skip over days 1 and 2 and start with 3. On day 3, we hear that God creates the land by pushing aside the waters, and God calls the land earth and the gathered waters sea. And then God calls forth the plants. This is the first time that God creates something that creates something. So God doesn't just create plants out of nothing, but God instead says, okay, earth, you take over. Plants come out of the earth, and the earth creates the plants. God sort of invites the earth into the creative process. Further, there's a ton of excitement in this passage about seeds. Seeds are mentioned 4 times. The word is repeated 4 times, again, probably emphasizing the creative power of created things. So God creates the earth that creates plants. God creates plants that create seeds. Seeds create new plants. And there's this beautiful cycle that God's establishing. It's not the first time that created things will be creating things. On day 4, we get the sun, moon, and stars, and we're told it's for the specific purpose of marking time and events and seasons. It has to be for something, because light was invented on day 1. And so the sun, what's the sun supposed to do if light's already been invented? It's for marking time. On day 5, God creates the first animals, which are animals in the sea and the air. Land animals are going to come later. And like the plants, God sort of invites the sea to create them. God said, let the seas swarm with living things, and let the sky be filled with birds. God then blesses those animals with a command: be fertile, multiply, and fill the earth. We're going to hear that again when it comes to humans. On day 6, God creates land animals. Again, God tells the earth to produce the animals, invites the earth to do into the creative process. And then finally, at the end of all of that, we get people. In verse 26, it says, or God says, let us make humanity in our image to resemble us, so that they may care for, my translation there, care for the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, and all the earth, and all the crawling things. Okay, first question. Who is us? Let us create. Who is the us? There's several explanations that are possible. One, it's the royal we. So God is saying, like the queen, we are not amused, right? The queen says that, and that's how queens talk. And so God is saying, let us create people. So that's one possibility, not my favorite, except that I get to do the voice. Christian interpreters will say it's referring to the Trinity, so God is talking to the Christ and the Holy Spirit, which makes absolutely no sense, because the Hebrew authors had no concept of the Trinity when they were writing, so that's probably not what it is. It could refer to an ancient pantheon of gods or a heavenly council of angels, which are referred to multiple times in the Hebrew scriptures. That's the most plausible explanation for what the we is. But I've got another one, and I don't know if I invented this or I heard it somewhere, but I wonder, when God says, let us create, is God talking to the animals? To this point, God has been acting alone. There's been no reference to a heavenly council mentioned, no plurals. But now, as soon as there are animals around, suddenly God starts using the plural. God starts saying, we, let us create. We've already seen that God likes to create things that create things. So maybe God turns to the animals here and says, okay, y'all, let us create humans together. Which, from an evolutionary perspective, is kind of what happened, right? Humans evolved from animals. The animals created us. And then we get the famous line, God created humanity in God's own image. In the divine image, God created them. Male and female, God created them. Now, we won't spend a lot of time here, but one way to interpret this is that God did not create them male or female, and thus institute a gender binary. God created them male and female, which at least I interpret to mean, and I think others historically have interpreted to mean, that we all contain both, that we all have male and female within us. I think this is a description of human gender diversity. So go tell your friends. And that brings us to 28 through 30. Now it's humanity's turn to get a blessing and a commandment. It's like a blessing commandment. They get the first three that the animals got: be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. And then we get two extras. In Hebrew, the words are kavash and radah, translated in the King James Version as subdue and have dominion over the earth. But let's work on those words a little bit. Kavash, as most basic meaning, is to walk upon. Sadly, in the Hebrew Bible, that's been interpreted to mean walk upon other people. And so when it's used in the Hebrew Bible, it has this violent connotation to it. It's used to mean slaughter, enslave, and even rape. It's a horrible word. But I wonder if we, here in Genesis 1, the first time it's used, we can remove those violent assumptions out of the word and go back to the basic meaning of to walk on something, like the earth, for instance. So there's nothing violent about walking upon the earth. What if Genesis 1:28 could just be read to be fertile, multiply, fill the earth, and walk upon it? Which is exactly what early primates did on the way to becoming Homo sapiens, by the way. They left the trees, they stood up on 2 feet, and they started walking upon the earth. The last commandment word here is radah, which means govern or rule, and that's pretty much what it means. So the question then is, what does it mean to be a good ruler? What does it mean to govern well? What does that look like? And the answer to those questions can be found in Psalm 72, where we have a prayer for King Solomon. And in the prayer for King Solomon, it includes these words from verses 12 through 14. The ruler delivers the needy when they call, and the poor when they have no helper. The ruler has pity on the weak and the needy, and saves the lives of the needy. From oppression and violence, the ruler redeems their life, and precious is their blood in the ruler's sight. So in other words, a good ruler takes care of the less powerful. A good ruler protects those who are most vulnerable to violence, and thus this blessing commandment, I think, should be interpreted: care for, take care of. Be fertile, multiply, fill the earth, walk upon it, and take care of it. And finally, we get to the verses which connect us to our theme for today about living resistance through the food that we eat. Verses 29 and 30, surprising for 2 reasons. First, here at the end of creating all things, after this epic 6 days of creation, creating light and darkness, land, sea, sky, sun, moon, stars, plants, animals, and humans, as day comes to an end, this dramatic day of creation, God takes these last moments to tell everyone what to have for dinner. God gives them dietary advice. Of all the things that God could have talked about at this moment, how to love each other, how to speak kindly to each other, how to raise our children, when to use our turn signal, like when to use reply all versus reply. Important things. God tells them what to eat. Why talk here about food? Well, if you think about it, eating is really one of the most basic things that we do. If we don't eat, we don't survive. We eat every day. We eat multiple times a day. And it's also an incredibly intimate activity. We put things in our mouths, this thing that we use to kiss with. Or maybe we kiss with the things we use to eat with. But it's very intimate. And we take stuff from outside the world, the creation, put it into our bodies, and it becomes part of us. It's an incredibly intimate act. Yet in our modern world, food is cheap. Even with rising food prices, food in America at least, is accessible, cheap, doesn't require us to have a ton of thought or effort to get it, for most of us at least. But there was a time when all human beings spent a lot of our time and effort on food, searching for it, figuring out if we could eat it or not, collecting it, planting it, growing it, harvesting, preparing, cooking, eating together. We evolved to enjoy food and all aspects of food. We evolved to not just enjoy the eating, but the pursuit of the food and the preparation of the food. I just wonder if we lose something fundamentally human when we stop caring about our food, when food just becomes fuel. So maybe that's what this gets at, why it has such a privileged place in the creation story, because it's just so essential to our humanity. And then the second surprising thing here is what God tells them to eat, which is only plants. Here at the beginning, we're all vegan. They're going to eat meat in the future in the Bible, that'll come up later, but here everybody's only eating plants, including the lions and tigers and bears. Like all the predators are eating just plants. Why is that? I wonder if it has to do with the context in which it was written. We believe that this story was written in exile. So this story, as well as most of the Hebrew Bible, was put into its final form, perhaps with some significant editing, while the Israelite people were in captivity in Babylon. That means this story received its final editings at the hand of a people who had experienced complete devastation of their lands and their people at the hands of an empire. They saw their people slaughtered, their homeland burned, their city destroyed, their temple desecrated and destroyed, and they were violently deported to another land where they were held captive. The irony is not lost that we see these cycles repeating all the time. 2 Chronicles describes the conquest of Babylon over Israel this way. The Babylonians killed Israelite youth with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, had no compassion on young man or young woman, the aged or the feeble. Further, in Jeremiah, it describes how the king of Judah was made to watch his sons killed in front of him, and then his eyes were gouged out. So the last thing he saw was his sons being killed by his enemy. So as that surviving remnant that experienced that level of trauma sat in captivity in Babylon, I wonder if they dreamed of a world with absolutely no violence. No more bloodshed. A world where the strong do not prey on the weak under any circumstances, where no predators at all. A world where all beings live in peace and without fear of harm. And maybe that's why they imagined at the beginning, everybody only ate plants. Now the message today is not that therefore, because Genesis 1 says so, we should all be vegan. But if we're going to think about all the ways that we can resist the domination system of this world, and resist the violence and the hierarchy and the inequality of empire, if we're going to resist the super wealthy ecocidal maniacs, we need to get serious and thoughtful about the very basic things in life, including our food. The most basic and intimate part of our life is what we eat. And so we need to think about where our food comes from. We need to center our food and our lives from the gathering to the preparing to the enjoying. We are not just machines that need fuel so that we can go to work and be busy and make things and produce. We are pleasure-seeking, meaning-making creatures in relationship with each other, in relationship with all the other pleasure-seeking creatures on this earth. We are a conscious part of a web of consciousness. And in that web of life, plants are the foundation. We are invited to eat a diet centered on plants for all the reasons, for environmental reasons, for health reasons, for the animals, and simply because we want a less violent world. And then beyond that, what we eat, resisting the domination system, also means things like buying directly from small farmers whenever we can. You know, the consolidation of small farms into large estates by the wealthy has been a mechanism of domination since the dawn of empire. It's one of the most basic things that happened. Remove people from their land. That's how empire is empire. So how can we support keeping people on their land? Shopping at farmers markets, for which we are blessed with wonderful ones around here, buying from small farmers, intentionally supporting farmers from marginalized communities, supporting farms that care for their workers, and all of that work is anti-imperial resistance work. On the other hand, we can also try to grow our own food. Nothing makes me appreciate farmers more than my sorry efforts to grow my own food. Even if you only have a container on a balcony or a windowsill herb garden, eating food that we've grown, it's one of life's great pleasures, and it certainly increases our appreciation for where food comes from and how much and who makes it. Take time preparing our food. Once we've received it, we are called to center cooking in our lives, especially cooking with others. One of the great joys is people in the kitchen together cooking. Centering the hearth as a part of our home. You all think of your kitchen as a hearth, that great word that has heart and earth and art all contained within it. And then eating with others. We prepared the food, eating with others, enjoying food together, bringing us again back to what we talked about last Sunday, how food around builds community, how the early church used food as a countercultural means to build community. We eat together joyfully, mindfully, gratefully, all ways of resisting. So in closing, I'll just share that back in the 1980s in Rome, Italy, a group of people got together for a protest. And they were protesting something that might be surprising. They were protesting the opening of a fast food restaurant in their neighborhood. Can you imagine us doing that today? But that protest never ended, because out of that protest was born the slow food movement. And the slow food movement is this alternative to fast food. It encourages us to slow down, to enjoy our food, to think about where it comes from, to care for the earth and the choices that we make, and to be together while we eat it. That movement today is its own nonprofit, the Slow Food International, and they envision a world, quote, where everyone can eat food that is good for them, good for the people who grow it, and good for the planet. That seems like a vision that Genesis 1 would agree with. So in closing, we resist the empire, the domination system, the violence of this world. We resist turning our bodies and the earth into machines when we center food in our lives. When we slow down, we take time to gather, prepare, and enjoy it. When we express our values through what and how we eat. The last thing it says in Genesis 1, after God gives the dietary instructions, we are told that God looked around and saw everything that was created, and for the first time, it was not just good, it was supremely good. Amen.